So here we are now. It's the 25th of November 2020, and we're now August, September, October, November, about 4.5 or more months into the whole thing in Ireland regarding wearing masks. I don't know how it's playing out in other countries. I wish them all the best. Anybody who's defying the mask thing, they're very much in my thoughts. But having said that, there's only so much time and energy one can devote to things like masks, so I'm sticking to Ireland. Just as a brief recap, the mask thing was allegedly made into law that it was mandatory to wear masks by way of a statutory instrument. It's very clear, and it's important to be very clear, that the statutory instrument itself is valid law. So people are saying, it wasn't passed through the Dáil and all that. It doesn't matter. We have to assume there's what's called the presumption of constitutionality. That statutory instrument signed by Stephen Donnelly, that conehead freak of a minister, has to be assumed as being constitutional. But then, okay, we assume it's constitutional, we assume that the minister had the right to do that, and as such it's valid law. But then you look a bit closer actually at it, and you realise that they don't even state if it's going to be a summary or indictable offence if you don't wear a mask. They don't state the burden of proof upon you if you're apprehended for not wearing a mask. So that means that there are so many holes in it actually that from the point of view of enforcing the thing, it's not going to happen. So, then you have to say, well, why is it? Were they so goddamn incompetent that they actually just drafted this and forgot to put in all of these things? The answer to that is a very clear no, because they pay lawyers in the background very large sums of money to do this kind of thing. To put it differently, when they bring in a statutory instrument that's legally enforceable and that's completely watertight, you can tell the difference in 2 seconds. So this statutory instrument was not legally enforceable and not watertight, so why did they do it? And the answer is clear. It's what Sherlock Holmes said. You deduct through all the options, and however implausible the one you're left with is, that's it. They did it deliberately as a trick. It's the only conclusion that can be reached if the law is so bloody unenforceable that it doesn't actually stand. So it was a trick, and it was done to see who would actually read the thing and see the huge glaring omissions and negligences in it that are so blanket and so far-reaching that, anybody who knows the law or who's using good lawyers would be able to challenge that in 5 seconds. They know this. Furthermore, there's no particular appetite on the part of the Gardaí to enforce crap like this. They've better things to be doing, far better things to be doing. The globalists are psychopaths, but they're also morons. You must always remember this. Psychopaths, one of the most enduring features of any psychopath is that they're incompetent and that they don't have an imagination. NPCs talk about not having an inner voice. This is true. Another thing that psychopaths don't have, and I'm saying this as a slight digression, another thing they don't have is sarcasm. We have been gaslit into thinking that sarcasm is the lowest form of wit. Sarcasm is one of the highest forms of wit because it's spontaneous. So we come out with sarcastic remarks in response to bullshit that people come out with. So, you're going through your day-to-day life and somebody says something that's bullshit and you come out with the sarcastic remark. That shows spontaneity and an ability to think on your feet. It shows a sense of humour, which itself is reflective of empathy. When people make us laugh, we empathise with them because laughter is involuntary, and the thing that they make us laugh at, we laugh at something because they have made us look again at something that we hadn't thought of prior to the moment that person made us laugh. Donald Trump has an ability to do that very much far and beyond anyone else. People neglect the fact that Trump is actually very, very good at stand-up. He would be, in terms of stand-up, Trump is as good as any of the professionals. Trump can hold an audience and can improvise and can go off on digressions and he has spontaneity. That's because he's not a psychopath. Psychopaths don't get sarcasm. I remember when I was in secondary school, there were 2 teachers, both, as it so happens, probably coincidentally, French teachers. One of them, a man teacher, was very popular with all of us, and he was an exceptionally sarcastic individual, but he was terribly funny. He could actually, I remember once he came into a class, he was taking a free class with us, and he says to a young fella down the back, "Move up here." "Why, sir?" "Don't take it personally, I just don't trust you." And everyone laughed their asses off at that. We all laughed our asses off at that, but it worked. Where there was another French teacher, a woman, and she was a psychopath, and she was incompetent and a very, very primitive individual altogether. And her sarcasm, and she tried sarcasm all the time, but it was just a very crude and very degrading form of snideness. That's not sarcasm in the sense that the previous teacher used. Don't take it personally, I just don't trust you. I still even smile when I think of that. That's a line I've used as a teacher. I thought it was a great line. So the sarcasm is a very sophisticated form of wit because it relies on common sense and it relies on an ability to improvise on the spot. We are gaslit about these things. They say, oh, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit. Who says it? The psychopaths say it. Now we're realising for the first time, probably in God knows how long, if it's ever happened before, that there is a psychopathic control grid out there. There is a psychopathic control grid out there. There are people, they're not people, there are these monsters who have been manipulating our perception really since we were born. Let's talk about masks. I was talking to somebody recently, a while ago, and they said, they're an anti-masker and they greatly respect me. And I just asked this one question of them. When you go to buy your groceries, do you wear a mask? And if they say yes, then they're not an anti-masker. As much as I might be critical of Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters, my criticism is based upon certain specific tactics that they've used, which I maintain still were wrong and were misconceived and were doing themselves no favours. But, you can bet your bloody life that Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters have very, very seriously never worn a mask. You can bet your bloody life that that's the case. So they're walking the walk and they've talked the talk. As much as I might be critical of certain tactics that they used, and the reason why I'm critical is because if they had used better tactics, they would have achieved more in a shorter amount of time. So I don't want to see them fail. I would like to see them succeed. Because they are prominent, they can catch the headlines, they get shit done. But at the same time, then they fuck up by, going into court the wrong way or having that protest that they had in court was fucking diabolical. Quite aside from being illegal. They talk about the Constitution, but they don't realise that the Constitution sets down separation of powers. So if you want to have a political protest in the forecourts, you're contravening the Constitution, because the forecourts is constitutionally a special place. It's there to administer justice. It's not there for political agitation. Do it out in the steps if you want to, but doing it in the forecourts is unconstitutional. The forecourts exists for justice and for court hearings and to administer the law. It doesn't exist for protests. Have your political protests somewhere else. This is something judges will also say as well. Please don't politicise the courtroom. Go to the Dáil to do that. And they're right. Judges are right when they say that. We have to have a separation of powers. That's how a republic works. The United States is a republic. Nowhere in their constitution does it have the word democracy. But that doesn't matter. When you have a republic, you have rule of law. When you have rule of law, you have, at least in principle, evenness of law for everybody. You don't need elections all the time. You look at Hong Kong before the British left. Hong Kong was a free society, yet it wasn't a democracy. It's only when the Chinese took over Hong Kong that it wasn't to do with being anti-democratic, because the Chinese, or whatever assemblies that they might have in Hong Kong, or whatever elections they have, the Chinese bloody well weigh them anyway. They put their foot on the scales. That's not the point. The point is that the Chinese have dismantled those objective rule of law protections that individual citizens enjoyed in Hong Kong. Communists always do that. Communists don't like the law. If you look at 1984, one of the descriptions in 1984, it's a very significant and important thing, is that the society of 1984 does not have any laws. When the communists took over, they abolished all laws. That's not a free society. That's the worst type of tyranny describable. That is the worst type of tyranny describable if all the laws have been abolished, and people are too stupid and gaslit by horseshit like RTE to realise that the Constitution and the judges of the High Court in Dublin and those laws are there to protect you as much as to protect anyone else. When you have a diminution of rule of law, when you have the laws being diluted or being curtailed, and that has happened relentlessly since 2011 under Fine Gael, although it's been happening from beforehand, it just developed a certain degree of enthusiasm because Fine Gael are all psychotics. But you need strong law. You need extensive legal protections for individuals and their businesses and their lands. One of the things Fine Gael did when they took over in 2011 was they introduced a property tax. A property tax is an attack upon the people of Ireland because taxing people for the right to live in the home that they own is an attack on private property. We're now talking about this all these years later. I saw it then at the time. There should be no tax on your home whatsoever. If you own the freehold title of your home, it's your property. And to have to pay an annual tithe on that is, in my opinion, possibly seriously unconstitutional. But more than that, more than it being unconstitutional, it's part of that broader agenda to attack private property. You own your own home, you own the freehold title of that, or you have some right to live in that for the rest of your life. They want to steal that from you. They want all your money and stuff. This year, we're in a situation now rather like 1940 in Europe. Hitler suddenly took over, Hitler and the Nazis took over much of Western Europe, the Low Countries, France, and they did it like a plague of locusts. That's where we're at the moment. But I've been reading about it. I've been reading an excellent book about it at the moment, about how Hitler ultimately failed. And Hitler's initial progress in Europe before he attacked the Soviet Union, and anybody who looks at the history can see that that was inevitable. He was always going to attack the Soviet Union. But what happened was that Hitler basically pushed a number of open doors. France was better armed than the Nazis, but they just did not have the will. It's as simple as that. You must have the will. You must have the fearlessness. If you don't have it, it doesn't matter how many guns you have. So, at the time in 1940, there was a broad consciousness. There was a real dark night of the soul across Europe where they said, oh, look what Hitler's doing, and he's this and he's that. And they didn't realise that everything Hitler was doing was built on sand. Well, many did. Many did. This is the same as what we're encountering in Ireland now. It's the same as what we're encountering in the US, and I'm completely reserving my position in that regard. All of these things that are being done to us are built on sand. The mask scam that started in August, that's built on sand. You look into the statutory instrument, you realise it's unenforceable, so it's horseshit. Sue me, prosecute me if you want to. Bring me to the district court. Once I read that, I said, for Christ's sake, I thought this was something to take seriously when I read the fucking thing. Jesus. And earlier this year, we had a general election in Ireland. Okay, there's now a lot of noise going on internationally about the election in the US. But in its own way, if you want to see it as a microcosm of what's going on internationally, the election in Ireland was significant, extremely significant, because we ended up with essentially a hung Dáil. So Fianna Fáil had the plurality. They had the most number of seats. Fine Gael then came third, and Sinn Féin came in between them. Sinn Féin are globalists. Sinn Féin are not a nationalist party. Sinn Féin are globalists. Sinn Féin are woke. Sinn Féin are all of those establishment things that so many people in Ireland are now really beginning to turn away from and are beginning to think stinks. So there we had three parties all basically singing from the same song sheet. The only one of those three parties that I would still has a little bit of humanity in their core is Fianna Fáil. I was a member of Fianna Fáil, but I left when Micheál Martin took over and shared a stage with Brian Cowan and Mary Coughlin. I wrote to him and I said, if you want to be associated with a pair of losers, I don't want to be associated with you. So that was when I threw in my membership of Fianna Fáil. I don't regret that, because Micheál Martin's been a dreadful Fianna Fáil leader. Micheál Martin actually has Fine Gael in his soul. This now gets to the bigger thing. Thomas Sheridan had a video a while ago talking about the distinction between the Democrats, that is in the US, and the Republicans in the US. The Republicans are like Fianna Fáil. They have grassroots cumana, or associations, and you can join them. The Democrats are a national machine that operates top down. Fine Gael is like that. But I would draw an even further comparison between Fine Gael and the Democrats, in that they're both dominated, I think more so on a percentage wise or proportionately Fine Gael than the Democrats even. They're dominated by psychotics. There is something positively sadistic about Fine Gael. And anybody who has been watching this for a long time will see that there's a very different complexion to Fine Gael from Fianna Fáil. A very different complexion to Fine Gael from Fianna Fáil. RTE and all of those ones would gaslight us into thinking that they're absolutely identical. By no means are they identical. I always said that a coalition between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael would fundamentally not work. And that's how it's now playing out. Varadkar is a very, very primitive psychopath. And Varadkar has spent day one of that coalition undermining the Taoiseach, or the nominal Taoiseach, Micheál Martin. Micheál Martin only occupies that position nominally. And he's a pathetic individual. His Achilles heel was that he could not stand the prospect of being the only Fianna Fáil leader not to be Taoiseach. That happened to William Hague in the British Tory party. He was the first Conservative leader not to be Prime Minister. So what? Who cares? Norman Tebbit said the job of the leader of the Tory party is to become Prime Minister. I take Tebbett's point. But sometimes it doesn't happen. Let go. Martin couldn't do that, though. Martin, I was thinking about it last night. Micheál Martin, his heart lies at Fine Gael. He's actually a Fine Gaeler. He is a do-gooder. He is... He has that Fine Gael, I don't know how to describe it. Okay, he's a do-gooder. He doesn't have that common sense, I suppose, that tends to be an overriding feature of Fianna Fáilers. Okay, they had Brian Cowan and that disabled woman who he made Taoiseach. All right, but at the same time, there's a much older Fianna Fáil that dates back to Lemass, that dates back to Eamon de Valera, that dates back to very hard-nosed, commonsensical leaders who were tough-ass politicians and who you took seriously. It was Lemass who set up RTE television, not de Valera. It was Lemass who set up that. Lemass was a moderniser, and not a globalist or a woke open borders type, but he was aware in 1960, Lemass was, that Ireland was falling behind, that we had become too insular, that we had become too backward, and that we did need to grow up and step out in the world. Lemass was progressive in the best sense, and he was imaginative in the best sense. Lemass was a moderniser. You know, Lemass was better than people recognise. Even in his own fractured and disparate way, Charles Haughey, well, at least Haughey, you would take him seriously. You wouldn't take Micheál Martin seriously. And, you know, I've said at length previously, Varadkar behaves like an embarrassing child. And not just even a child. There are many people we know who have childlike qualities. Nothing wrong with that. But Varadkar behaves like a stupid, annoying show-off. And Varadkar is a psychopath. So you don't engage with a psychopath. Under any circumstance. You walk away. It's better to cut your losses and walk away. If there's a psychopath around. Micheál Martin did not. Micheál Martin made that fatal error when Varadkar was handed the role of Taoiseach in 2017 and Club Montrose erupted in jazz hands. That was the point at which Martin had said, right, supply and confidence is over, now we're going for an election. Because he wouldn't have done any worse than he's done already. He was a breath of fresh air in Fianna Fáil. He was untested as party leader. Or, sorry, he wasn't really. He'd been Fianna Fáil party leader for a while. Since 2016 at least, if not earlier. So no, that's a mistake on my part. It was Varadkar who was new as Taoiseach. And Martin, had he had the slightest degree of guile, would have taken advantage of Varadkar's newbiness and the fact that In reality, a lot of people did not like what they saw with Varadkar. They still don't. This is completely outside of the loop of Club Montrose and the Irish Times. But Varadkar was never an appealing individual. It's not as if people saying, the polish wore off. He never had polish. He was always a dork and a loser. He was always like that. So, let's get back to the mask thing. It's interesting, though, to talk to people. It's interesting. And they say, oh, I'm an anti-masker. Oh, yeah, I'm a hardline anti-masker. I just say to them, do you wear a mask when you go to the shops? Oh, well, I do. Then you're not an anti-masker. You're not an anti-masker. I have not worn a mask once since August. Except when I was doing stupid photo shots using that leather mask. And that leather mask, Jesus. First of all, it was virtually impossible to breathe in the fucker. It's real leather, it's not even plastic. It's not pea leather. It's real leather, that mask is. Jesus. And when I took it off my face, it stank. It reeked when I took it off my face. It reeked for an hour after. You could smell it for an hour afterwards. It stank when I took it off my face. Oh, man. Jesus, I only took the photographs in the garden. Oh, fucking hell. When I took that thing off, Jesus, what are those masks that the normies are wearing around the shop? What are they gathering? Ugh. Oh, Jesus. That was the only time I wore a mask. And I did it just as a piss take. I did it for the crack. And I did it at home. I didn't do it in public. I did it in my home. I've never, seriously, never ever, I wouldn't dream of wearing a mask in public or going shopping or any of that. And, then you look at D. Wall and all these ones who are going up to shops with declarations and documents. These documents. All they're doing is looking for trouble. Because I haven't got any trouble from people in official positions, and I include shop workers in that, I met the Gardaí in the supermarket, and Jesus Christian, they said, how are you getting on not wearing a mask? Is anybody giving you any trouble? No, I said, because I wrote to the managements in advance and told them I wouldn't be wearing a mask. I was claiming my exemptions under the statutory instrument. Did that work? The guard said. Yes, it did. Fair play, they said. The guards and myself agreed to something. Sometimes you'll get psychopaths who are looking for trouble, but generally, if you do not go out looking for trouble, then you won't get it. So I was clear about the fact, yes, I wasn't going to wear a mask. But other than that, I'm not going to lecture people. I'm not going to live stream people. I'm not going to harangue people who are simply doing a job. And you will see videos of, there was one video of a guy in a shop delivering a lecture about people being sheeple. And what actually one read through in the video was that they would have let him into the shop without a mask. He was just doing it for attention and causing trouble. Well, he deserves whatever he gets then, and he gets no sympathy or support from me. I'm not going to go to protests. I'm not going to go to marches. I'm not going to lecture people. I'm simply going to do my protest by not wearing a mask any time when I go in public shopping. 1 or 2 times, a chemist where I get stuff from my mum has said, well, we'd like you to wait outside and we'll serve you out the door. I say, fine. I'm not going to argue with them about that. That's their right. They're still serving me. So, they're not going to get a lecture from me. There's not going to be any trouble. All the other shops I've gone to, hardware stores, grocery shops, news agents, the bank, all of the post office, nobody has given me a moment's trouble. I think it may also even be a Jungian thing. If you haven't got that in you to look for trouble from these people, they don't give it to you. They don't give it to you. In relation to what's going on in America, nobody in Ireland has any input into this. I'm an experienced court practitioner in my own... That doesn't mean I win things. I've lost a shitload more than I win. I don't have any shame in admitting that because I don't take money off people. And I don't represent anybody other than myself. But I am experienced at how court works. And, Trump, for some reason, Trump has just decided not to back down on this. And, there's a reason why. We don't know the reason why at the moment. We may never know the real reason why. But I can tell you this. The mainstream media and all the people chitter-chattering about what's going on do not know what goes on behind the scenes in litigation. I know that. Because I've read court reports about court cases that I've been party to. And I've read articles, and indeed you've even had on one or two occasions pundits on the radio talking about court cases that I've been party to. And that proved to me that they don't know their ass from their fucking elbow. And it's the same with what's going on in the US. We don't know what's actually at play here. We don't know what's happening here. We're not privy to it. Nobody in Ireland is privy to it, and only a small handful of people in the US are privy to it. And does John Williams in RTE think that he is a hotline to these people? Oh, fucking get real. They're all coneheads. Williams is another conehead. And Brian's something or other, that NPC who's their Washington correspondent. Couldn't write books for fucking junior infants. They're all coneheads. Stephen Donnelly's a conehead. Coneheads everywhere. What is it with them? And they all have the same misshapen head and smug, empty face. Every single one of them. They all look the fucking same. It's a video I put up a while ago. You can't sit with us. Same with me when I take court cases and people are saying to me, well, I hear this, and I've heard you're a cunt. I've heard you're a cunt, I said to somebody. And the difference is what you've heard is wrong and what I've heard is fucking right.